Bigfoot Sasquatch mystery coast to coast and continent to continent. It's the Bigfoot Field Guide radio show, presented by the Mid-America Bigfoot Research Center. Over the next hour, we'll discuss sightings, behavioral characteristics, useful equipment, and all that is Bigfoot. Pull up a chair and join the conversation. The Bigfoot Field Guide radio show is on the air.
Believe that the extraordinary should certainly be pursued. But extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Okay, welcome everybody. My name's D.W. Darkwing Lee. I'm joined by my co-host Randy Rebellistic Savage and our guest host Jim Biggjimm Whitehead. I think I need to add Jim onto the credits, so because he'll be joining us quite a bit. So I want to say hi to Randy. Welcome you back after your trip selling fireworks.
Hey,
and Big Jim. Yeah, go ahead, Randy.
It was a good time, And again, we were more towards the southern part of Illinois. And believe it or not, you hear some strange stories when you're in that neck of the woods, too. Something about our Bigfoot mascot that we always have out that seems to get us some attention. That this goddamn crazy guy wearing Bigfoot hats at times. So that makes a difference.
So glad to have y'all back. Big Jim, you've been pretty much got your nose to the grindstone. You were at the Kiamichi Mountain Bigfoot conference.
Yes, it was.
So, you've been staying pretty busy while me and Randy been out goofing off. So, but I want to get right into the gist of things. Tonight we're going to talk about finding your own research area. I know a lot of new folks coming into the community. They get lost because there's not really a lot of information on how to guide you into finding your own research area. And I know all three of us have probably a few different ways of doing it, but we do have a presentation here that we'll kind of go along with, and hopefully it'll give us some guidance on how to do everything. So how to locate research areas. I do want to go to the next slide. This is the one thing that a lot of people have got to stop doing. First off, never ambulance chase sightings. If you hear that there is a sighting 3 counties over, a week ago, and you go running over there expecting Bigfoot to still be in the area, chances are Bigfoot's not going to be there. We have a former associate that's all he seems to want to do is, if there is a Bigfoot sighting, he'll do everything he can to get into that area. And then when nothing happens, he tries to claim that nothing happened originally. So, that's what you'll pretty much fall into is you'll go into the area. If nothing happens, then you'll be casting doubt on whether anything happened in the first place. So it's not really a good thing to do. I don't know how Randy and Jim feel about that, but.
Well, yeah, again, it just doesn't make any doggone sense because, again, number one, without a credible sighting, and misidentification, if people got Bigfoot on their mind and they see anything else that they can't explain, they're going to say Bigfoot. Yeah, right. I've never been one that I thought that would be an easy way of doing it at all. I mean, I wouldn't want to be harassed if I told somebody I had a Bigfoot sighting by a bunch of different people coming in. So I wouldn't do that to somebody else.
Yeah, and I mean, as far as going on an investigation after a sighting, I've never had an issue with that, just because it gives you a little more data. But if you're trying to show up directly after a sighting and expecting it to be there, you're just wasting gas money and resources you could put into something else.
Yes.
So we'll go on to the next one. And this is one thing that I admit sometimes I screw up on this, because you need to document everything. You know, document your maps, document locations, every little bit of detail. And this is where Robert Swain really impressed me. He's got that notebook that has all his information on. Every time he goes in the woods, he keeps a detailed log, maps. You know, he hand draws the maps, and his detail for the documents. I mean, it blew me away first time he showed me that booklet.
Yeah, because that I'm really bad on too. I mean, and let's face it, you know, because we've got places of interest, we really don't want to give out details to it either. So, in my research area anyway, I make up names like Scotty's or Lightning Ridge, Tired Ridge, different things that if I document Tired Ridge, there's no place on the map that even shows it. So again, when going out, especially again, it doesn't. Part of me doesn't want a paper trail, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but you know, for somebody coming in new, you know, mainly the documentation is for their own benefit, you know, own personal use. And that's something that the MABRC has done since time beginning. Is we've always gave our research areas code names. You know, everybody in the group knows, you know, what the code name means, you know, and where it's at. It's just, you know, we protect ourselves that way.
So, yeah, and you also got to. I just want to add that once you know, the public location gets out where one of these areas is, you're going to have people trying to claim jump, and you know, some of these areas there are, you know, number one, it can mess with the research. Number two, in the case of like some of them, you know, the landowner might live down there. They might have family down there. You might have family down there. And they probably don't appreciate it if you get a bunch of people showing up looking to bag a Bigfoot.
Yeah. You know, one thing though, again, and I think we've all done it. We've all got anything that we collect out there. I mean, my audio is time stamped. I know Darren's FLIR and stuff is all time stamped. You know, again, Jim starts doing his casting and stuff. I mean, we got documentation that it's happening and this and that. You know, and again, that's important. But again, I'm one, if you ask me the last time I went out with the moon phase was, I can look it up because of the time date stamp, but I don't have it a book type situation with it.
Yeah, it's definitely, like I said, Robert Swain really impressed me because he put all that information in his little notebook, and he can tell you the moon phase, the weather, everything for each incident that he's been a part of. So, but outside of that, let me go on to the next slide here. Something that kind of goes back to the ambulance chasing. You need to go back 5 years at least on sighting reports, and only use the ones that an actual sighting occurred. You know, there's so many reports get turned in. Oh, I heard a noise and I think it was Bigfoot. Recently, it was discovered that the Ohio howl that was recorded by Matt Moneymaker back in the 90s, it actually got debunked. It's a old hand crank siren that they used for coyote hunting. So, you don't want to use sighting reports where somebody heard something or, a rock got thrown at them, because here about 5 months ago, I think it was, there was a cop that heard an acorn fall on a vehicle and thought it was a gunshot, proceeded to empty his gun at his prisoner who was handcuffed in the back of the car.
Damn.
So people hear things and they have different reactions. And also, it may not be Bigfoot related. So in my opinion, you really only need to use sighting reports where they actually say they saw the Bigfoot.
Yeah.
And you really should note all the details that may be critical, what time of night it was or what time of day, the weather, if they put it on there, just key information. So
and one thing that helped me finding my research area is, again, there were reports of road crossings of the sightings of them over the time frame. And again, they didn't say that it was at this exact spot on this road, because McDonald County doesn't have road markers to speak of.
Yeah.
But again, if say a road is 5 miles long and over 8 years time frame, there's 6 different road crossing sightings. That gives you a pretty small area to actually go do some looking at.
Yeah, that's, a lot of times the sighting reports don't get real general. I mean, that they're real general. They're not real specific. But, if you go on to, say, the BFRO's website to Adair County, which is my county here for Oklahoma, you can pretty much get an idea of where they're talking about.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, at least a rough idea.
Yeah. So now everybody may be saying, hey, had to go over here and look, just make sure there ain't nobody in the chat room and asking questions. But here's some of the sites that you can go to check out sighting reports for your area. Whoa. Randy, I think you're getting feedback on your side.
Okay, what does it sound like?
Like buzzing.
Yeah, bee or something got in there.
The thing I've got going on is there is a fan in here. If you go give me a second, I'll jump up and shut it off, see if that disappears.
Okay.
Did that seem to make it better?
Yeah. Still just a little bit of humming, but that's probably just because it's. But anyway, of course, we had the BFRO, we had the GCBRO, we have the woodape.org, which is the North American Wood Ape Conservancy. They used to be the Texas Bigfoot Group. Of course, we got the MABRC, Oregon Bigfoot. She has a sizable database, and of course, there's a lot of sightings on BigfootEncounters.com. Now, as far as the MABRC, we went and saved a lot of the sighting reports off of some of the old defunct websites. So, if like you're looking for the International Bigfoot group, we've actually got their sighting reports pretty much. I'd say about 90% of those. So, go and check out your sighting reports for your area. So now here comes the fun part. Used to, I'd say, check out topographical maps, but technology has really surpassed us. You can go to Google Maps and it shows you the details through satellite views, terrain views, the whole 9 yards. And of course, trying to apply the sighting reports as close to the area as possible. You get within 10, 15 miles, that's still pretty close. So I don't know how much you guys actually use Google Maps these days.
All the time.
Yeah, I still use them quite a little because, again, I wish my memory was good as it used to be. But again, okay, if I'm on Lightning Ridge and I want to see, well, how big was Pine Ridge? I've been on it several times, but again, in the lay of the land, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Or I would pick up an audio recording that, hey, that sounds kind of like, is there a farm that direction? You can pull up Google Maps, or you can pull up Google Earth is the one I probably use more, because that shows the tree cover and it'll show the different properties. And again, okay, well, maybe Farmer Sam down the road brought in some calves that he didn't have before. And again, after that recording, then I can take a drive that direction and find out if he's got calves in it.
Yeah.
Too many times we've had sounds, even in Darren's area, where it sounded like a cow in the middle of the woods. And again, there's nothing around there. Not that it couldn't be a cow, but again, it's an unusual noise because of the location it was at. And if you're finding, stuff moved into an area, a cooler or something like that, what's around that might have explained that. And if the nearest house is a mile away, it puts some credence that maybe something did carry that to that location.
So, yeah, that's one thing that I really like being able to do, is see where the area houses are compared to where I'm at, doing the research. So, here's kind of an example of terrain view. This is an area north of where I live, and this is the terrain view, and you can see where the creeks are in this area, but they also have little valleys that they're flowing through. So, this gives you a good indication of, I'm going to be honest, Bigfoot's probably lazy just like humans are. They're going to go the easiest route possible, if it's safe. I can't see them dropping over a mountain there just to get down to the creek again. But you can take a look at this and see, okay, that's where the creeks are flowing at. And then you can switch over to satellite view. And of course, you see that there's several little farms in this area. So, there's houses there. And there is quite a bit of woodland areas around it that, technically a Bigfoot could probably hide out in. But, you look at stuff like this and it makes you, it gives you an idea of where to concentrate at.
Yep.
So, like later tonight when I go out and sit with Cherokee Rose, we're going to try to go up to an area that we have looked at before that's actually across from an area that we've been researching at quite a bit in the past. So maybe we'll have some luck with that.
Cool.
So, and this is just some of the stuff that I've put down here, guys. You know, you look for water sources, food sources, natural cover and concealment, natural or man-made avenues to travel on, and location of civilization to the area. And this is some of the stuff that you just talked about, Randy. You know, how close is the houses to the area you were in? So it does, you know, we cover a lot of stuff, but as the satellite image showed, you know, there was water in that area. There was actually some natural cover and concealment because they could go down through the creek bank there.
And like you were mentioning there in the little valleys and stuff, and they're going to take the easiest routes. You know, instead of trying to look for a needle in a haystack, you know, hedge your bets because they're going to take the wildlife corridors. You can see that on these maps.
Yeah. And now this is something that was told to me by a individual game warden. He was saying that during the winter, most animals will move down into the ravines, but during the summer, they try to move up to the top where they got more wind coming through. And then a source told me that another geologist told him that the sweetest water is on top of the ridges and hills. So, you know, I'd like to say right now, you know, there's a lot of drought in this area to the point, you know, where a lot of our creeks are dried up and some of the ponds. So it only just makes sense that the Bigfoot would be staying close to water during this time.
Oh, yeah.
So, especially since next Tuesday or Wednesday, I think it is, the heat index is going to be 111.
They're talking it's supposed to warm up.
Yeah.
You know, again, I think those top three are probably, you know, the water, the food, and the cover. I think that they can work around and with the man-made stuff and civilization, but from my own research area, I can say those three are what the main strong points I look for. One thing over here in the Ozarks we're lucky with, most of the bottom of these valleys or these hollers have got some sort of water spring in the bottom. They're not all, you know, huge amounts, but there's always fresh water versus stagnant pond water and stuff like that, that, you know, the cows will drink out of and stuff. And I have had quite a little success, again, in my audio work of focusing on those hollers that have live springs in them, even if it's only, you know, 5-8 gallons a minute. I mean, we don't have to have big running water, but we've got to have the water there. And that's been a location where I've usually set up where the parabolics pointing down into those areas. And that's where a lot of the different stuff that I've caught has come from.
Well, just kind of to agree with you there on something, you know, one of my most prominent research areas, the area that you guys know that I refer to as Mushroom Gully. It's just a little tributary creek, but if you follow it up to the creek head, there is a very large spring, and there's always fresh water coming right out of the rock face there.
Yep.
And you know, that Mushroom Gully is an area that has had a lot of activity over the years.
And again, if you're lucky enough, like a lot of them that I have in my research area, even in drought years, they seem to flow.
Mm-hmm.
You know, where again, We got wet weather springs. Well, everybody's familiar with those. Every time it rains, you got a squirt coming out of the side of a hill. That's not a big deal. But if you can find one in a location of sightings where there is, again, that type of spring, that, in my opinion, would be a hot spot to take a look at.
Well, and, we covered the three top ones real good, but one of the man-made avenues that I like to look at too is the high voltage power line right of ways, because we've realized over the years that for our research areas, they're all interconnected by this power line right of way, and it's almost as if the troop in our area seems to use this as a means of navigation. They don't walk down the middle of the right of way, but I believe they walk down through the woods beside it, just to make sure they get to where they're going.
Well, I mean, you take a look at the expedition we had years back where, again, a main four-wheeler trailer that we used day in and day out during the expedition, we went out and there was a footprint in it.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not arguing with your idea on it, but why wouldn't they walk down on the edge of it? I still think that they use man-made trails, whether that's through a hiking park. When we've done some research up in the Bennett Springs area of Missouri, I mean, the places around there are loaded with hiking trails.
Yeah.
And the sightings that are in that area are from people on the hiking trails. It's not so much road crossings there as, they've got natural arches and different things that people love to go and look at. And that seems to be where it is, almost like they're also using the man-made hiking trails to get through that super thick brush.
Yeah, kind of like when my four-wheeler got picked up, it was on the trail. Yep. And when I come around that corner and they were walking, they were on the trail carrying a calf. And
that was like Louisiana, all those pipelines, and even eastern Texas that we were in, all those pipelines that run through there. That's about the only place you can walk on that area without having all the thorns and all the stickers and snakes and whatever, to where I wouldn't discount. In fact, I would put more weight on it if it's in one of those right-of-way areas, because, again, the deer use them. Anything that's trying to move through the woods is going to use those, and I can't imagine a critter like Bigfoot not being smart enough, or whatever excuse you want to use, not to use the same thing.
Yeah, and most of those pipeline right-of-ways, they keep, cut down to where there's no vegetation on them except for tall grass.
Yep,
so
that's exactly it.
Something I kind of want to touch up on here. We're talking about these natural and man-made avenues and the location of civilization to an area. In my area, it's a little more, there's more houses in the rural countryside than there are in, let's say up there in Darren's area, because there's more population here. But there's also a lot of pastures and stuff. The natural corridors, the creeks in this area, you'll have hills, and every hill will have a creek, but the creek will be deep cut about, it could go down 12 foot, it can go down 30 feet. But it'll be deep cut enough that you can have large animals moving up and down that creek. And, it'll go down, and then you'll have a flat part at the bottom of the creek, and then the creek might be 2 feet wide, but the actual creek cut is, maybe 15 feet across. And I think that is crucial when you're dealing with areas that are a little more populated and you've got sightings in them, because it gives them an easy way to get it through there. I'm reminded of talking to another researcher a few years back, and we were discussing some sightings down in Texas, and there was a couple of housing sects in there in the area, and the guy said, well, there's no possible way they'd be down there. There's a housing sect a half mile to the north and a half mile to the south, and he was of the opinion it was just too much human habitation there. And I just kind of said, well, yeah, but there's a good creek system that flows right in between them. And he said, well, I don't see how they'd be going up and down through there without being seen. I said, well, if a cow can get down that creek without being seen, pretty sure a Bigfoot could too. I mean, it's not like it's a brontosaurus.
Yep. And again, even some of these small rural communities, like when we were out at Thumperville for that expedition, Robert Swain was out there. Go into the little convenience store in the town of 300, 500 people. And they asked for yeah. Well, again, I'm giving it the benefit of the doubt, but when Robert talked about that, we were there looking to research Bigfoot, and the gal says, oh, well, then you should set up your chair in the parking lot and watch the dumpster. They're always in it. How can you have a comeback on that and say that area is not active when they say, hey, they love the dumpster dive? Just check the dumpster, watch the dumpster.
Yeah, and there's a lot of areas around a lot of these rural areas where they've got multiple dumpsters where you can go dump your trash and everything.
Yep.
And I know several in southeast Oklahoma where people went up to dump their trash and a bear come out, The bear had been sitting in there going through trash, and when they dump theirs, he gets spooked and jumps out. So.
Yep.
Well, some of these small towns, you got a town where the main street is all of maybe a block, 2 blocks long, and then you go off of it, you're back in the woods. These things can venture right in there. The town I went to school in was like that, and the whole town's ringed by woods, and I've often had a strong sneaking suspicion that they were going in and raiding the dumpster by the school cafeteria, because all they got to do is walk across the ball field and they're out of the woods and at the school cafeteria.
Yeah. Well, it's like down at Honubby, they right there, basically where we used to go and have expeditions at, they've got all the town dumpsters there, and they had 2 restaurants basically at one time, and what they do is they take their leftovers and dump them in them trash cans, and they would even tell you, if you sit down there, chances are you're going to see the Bigfoot come down and raid the dumpsters.
Yep.
So,
well, one of the sightings, part of where, again, I don't ambulance chase by any means, but I've got a police scanner here at home. And when you start hearing reports of somebody raiding a dumpster out of a schoolyard during summer school, and the description comes back as, tall, black hoodie, all dressed in black, and they get there, there's nobody there, they say it ran across the road. Then you start looking at the area, and one of my first on-site investigations I did was a mile from that as the crow flies into the woods from that school. And again, those kids, one kid was completely petrified by running into a Bigfoot. And when I start hearing those descriptions, and then again, what is tall? The average person and I don't care, I'm a carpenter's son. But if I don't have a reference of an 8-foot mark in a tree or know the height of branches in a tree, I can't tell you if someone was 5 foot tall or 6 foot tall or 7 foot tall. I just saw a person by a tree. Until I get up by the tree, then I can measure it up more. So when they were saying a tall person, were they meaning a 5'8", 6'5", or could it have been quite a little taller? And that went on for the entire time summer school was going on that year. And when summer school quit, so did the prowler call of them being over by the school, looking like they were messing around the dumpster. Could it have been a homeless person? Maybe. We don't have that big of a problem. We didn't at that time. But when you start listening to some of the reports on scanners about prowlers in this certain area, time and time and time again, and those prowlers are coming in from the middle of the woods or the next nearest house is a mile away, you go and investigate these areas. You talk to the people, like that one investigation I went on. They were convinced it was prowlers up until they saw Bigfoot because it walked on 2 feet. And again, my question is, did those prowlers ever take anything? Well, no. Then what's the use of being a prowler?
Yeah.
People aren't going to go out in the middle of the goddamn country snooping around somebody's property with the chance of getting some buckshot in their butt if they're not out there to steal. And when nothing was taken, stuff might have been moved around, but it hadn't been taken. The police show up. They say, yep, we can see what looks like footprints in the dew. They were headed toward the creek or whatever. Again, you can't just automatically write that off as people if you're going to look for a place to Bigfoot research. Because, again, people don't even come to their mind most of the time when they see something in the distance. Is that a man or is that a Bigfoot? Unless they've been exposed to Bigfoot before.
And
you
see.
Go ahead, Jim.
I was going to say, and you see that same story a lot in the historical sightings too. You'll have police will get a phone call, and this will happen, several times enough that the newspaper will give it a little moniker. They'll call it something like the Barefoot Prowler, and they'll say that this guy had really huge feet, didn't steal anything except for maybe a chicken or two, and then they're gone.
Yep, no more problem. Yep.
So I'm not going to say the name of the town or the park, but there's a town that's right beside a national park, and wedged in between them is a nursing home. And some of the times that I've been down there at this location, when it gets dark, nobody goes outside to smoke or even take the trash out, because they claim that the Bigfoot come up there and raid the garbage dumpsters after dark. And this park's well known for having activity. And if you talk to some of the other businesses, they'll tell you, yeah, the Bigfoot come all the way up through the creek there in the middle of the town and raid the dumpsters at the fast food restaurants. So, I'm sure y'all know what park I'm talking about. But, that just goes to show you that, yeah, civilization to an area doesn't really kill Bigfoot activity. But when you hear a report of somebody saying, well, we seen a Bigfoot in a city park, and you go and you look at the city park and it's surrounded by about 3 miles of civilization all the way around, and then you got this little patch of a park, it's probably safe to assume that somebody's either hoaxing by putting on a Bigfoot costume, or they're just trying to get 15 minutes of fame for having a sighting. One of those that happened a couple of years ago, they said happened in a park, and when I looked at the map, it was dead center of a major metropolitan area, and there wasn't no tree, well, any wooded areas, probably 15 miles away. So, you know, I couldn't believe a Bigfoot would go all the way through all that civilization just to hang out in that little bitty park.
Yeah.
So you got to use a lot of common sense when you look at this stuff.
Well, you know, there's a lake not too far from us, Table Rock Lake, where there is restaurants there that has the same problem that you talk about. They refuse to take garbage out.
Yeah.
They even went to the point where they put up a bright light to try to get people to see there's nothing here and you're safe to go out to it. And whatever it was that was raiding the dumpsters ended up throwing a rock or something up. And after the fourth time it broke the lights out, they said, just leave it in the doorway till morning. We'll take it out when the sun rises.
Yeah.
Well, we had a very similar story in that town down to the south of me with the Pizza Hut, where there's the Pizza Hut's right at the edge of town, and there's actually a watershed lake right behind it. And right behind that is one of the areas we were researching for a while. And the Pizza Hut had a fence there that kept getting pushed down from the direction of the lake. And they got to the point where they just put one of those orange mesh nets up around the Pizza Hut facing that side because the fences kept getting pushed over. Finally, they've now got like a 10-foot tall fence with, inch thick tubing and, heavy wooden planks that ain't going to go nowhere. But I mean, it just shows you that in some of these areas, it seems like people are very much aware of it.
Yeah. So I'm going to go on to the next slide here, guys. This kind of goes back to what you just said, Biggjimm, watersheds and lakes. We're going to use Oklahoma as an example. We've got numerous watersheds, and it really does support large numbers of wildlife. And when you look at each watershed and each lake, I mean, they really can support a Bigfoot troop, dozen, 15, 20 Bigfoot, because there's plenty of food. I actually think that they probably go and raid the campgrounds a lot because a lot of people will leave their ice chest out beside their camper, not thinking anything about it. And that's always been one thing. I always hope that I see a Bigfoot carrying an ice chest, drinking a beer, just staggering. So
if they're drinking a beer instead of chewing on a chunk of trout, I think it was a kid.
Yeah. So, but a lot of these watersheds and lakes are interconnected with waterways. And of course, they are dependable water sources. And I think we talked about, a lot already about the water sources. I really think that they will stay close to a water source when it's kind of like drought conditions like it is right now.
Yeah.
So about a week ago, I think it was, we went down to check one of our research areas, and the creek was pretty much dried up. So, they're going to stick close to where there's enough water to survive. But any thoughts or input or anything before I go on to the next one?
No, I mean,
well, again, I think we've already talked about that with it comes to springs, and Jim was talking about that one on Mushroom Gully, and that's the biggest thing I see here. I mean, if you got a drought season and you can find live water, that's an ideal area to go.
Yeah. So food sources, You know, I'll admit, as a former Boy Scout, we specialize in wilderness survival, so we learned all the different edible plants out there. Especially as teenage boys, we were starving. We'd eat just about anything. But you know, a lot of local farms, and I'm not trying to be down on farmers or anything, but a lot of them, when they have cattle, if a cow dies, they'll just leave it out there in the field. Uh, you know, it becomes free food for whatever comes up and eats on it. Pigs, they usually take to the back 40 and dump it in the very back of their property. Uh, some of the chicken houses, I've seen, you know, them gather up the chickens and go dump them out back behind where nobody can see them. So, of course, deer populations, you know, we all know that the deer population has exploded. Uh, the other night, I seen about a dozen of them just standing on the side of the road watching cars go by. So, but I want to just go all the way down to the bottom one there, slaughterhouses. One of my favorite reports was actually of the white Bigfoot back in the 90s, and it kept coming around a slaughterhouse. And what they were doing is they were dumping everything that they didn't use for that they were cutting up and everything. They put it in this pit, and several times the white Bigfoot would come up there, and of course he'd look awful bloody by the time he was done, but he'd get in that pit, get out what he could. And so, you know, when you look at all this stuff, if you see several farms around, I mean, I wouldn't put it past Bigfoot, and I've actually seen them carrying about a 500, 600-pound calf on their shoulders. It wouldn't surprise me that being a predator that they'd go after young calves for food, you know. So,
Well, another thing about the farms, and again, I've raised critters most of my life, and one thing that I hear more and more is they got what they call creep feeders. It's a feeder that the calves can get into but the big cows can't. And I hear about creep feeders going empty too fast. Well, that would mean you've got to open the lid. Cows can't open the lid.
yeah,
When I was at a feed store here a few years back, there was a guy that was in there, and he was just cussing up a storm. He had bought another salt block. He couldn't believe his cows were going through a salt block a week, and cows won't. But that doesn't mean something might not have been playing with those salt blocks and taking them out in the woods.
yeah,
I left something in the field and it's disappeared, and find it on the other side of the fence. Well, doggone, what carried it over there? But farms nowadays, with the mechanized farming that they've got, when everything is fed out of big hoppers and stuff, I think you're probably seeing losses in sweet feeds and the different feeds that are being fed from these farms. Again, I don't disagree. They'll take some livestock if they can, but just kind of like the deer, they'll follow those salt blocks. They'll follow those mineral licks. And again, I can't imagine Bigfoot not doing the same thing. There was one guy that kept talking about a bear was opening his feed shed, going in, opening his barrels, eating the sweet feed, putting the cover back on the barrel, and closing the door on the way out. Now, I know a little bit about bears living in northern Minnesota growing up. They'll tear crap apart if they have to. They won't open a door and then close it. They'll rip it off the hinges, and the barrel will not be standing with the lid back on it when the feed's gone.
Well, there's a lot of reports of bears going into cornfields and grabbing bushels of corn under each arm and walking off with them.
Yep. And again, that's one thing about the farm life. Again, a lot of times these people just don't pay attention. And, we had a goddamn hog farm up here. And yeah, when it finally shut down, we had a massive overload of coyotes. Because again, they got so fat and sassy, they'd sit at the bottom of the holler. When they throw the dead hogs out, they'd just go up the hill a bit, chow down, and go back down and rest.
Yeah.
And it took us about 5 years to clean them down to where they were at acceptable level. But this whole area, part over here where I do the research, like you say, that's common. If there's an animal goes down, if it's too big to haul out, they'll leave in the field. But most time, if they catch them good enough, they'll drag them to the nearest hauler. And they've all got one particular hauler that they use, which is usually one of the furthest from the house. They don't have to smell it.
Yeah.
Something that I think is kind of interesting. Also, it's not necessarily a food source, but it is in a way. We hear a lot of stories about road sightings. And one of the things that I have kind of noted in my area, we do not, a lot of places do, but my area does not have anybody that picks up roadkill. And we got a lot of roadkill that just disappears.
Yeah.
Somebody will hit a deer and then it's gone.
Yeah. That's one thing that's prime on 3 of the sides of my main research area. Again, they'll get report in that there's a deer that's just got hit. And again, all the times I've gone out to my research area, I have never found a dead deer laying alongside the road. In fact, this is a well off topic, but that Missouri scream that I've recorded, I've often wondered if that wasn't a food call. And when you hear that, and earlier in the day, you ended up hearing of a scanner call about 4 o'clock in the afternoon that a car hit a deer, and they needed the officer to come out and dispatch the deer. And then about 4 or 5 hours later, you record that recording. If that's a food, I've got food call, what else might it have been?
Yeah.
Well, I think that might also help explain why there's so many road crossing sightings. Is these things might be cruising along the edge of the road, hiding along the overgrown fence lines, just seeing if they can spot something to snack on.
Or it could just be an older Bigfoot that can't hunt no more.
Yeah.
But this kind of gets away from the road crossings. But one of my favorite all-time reports was based on this farmer who had 2 chicken houses. And I mean, I'm talking the Tyson type, the big long ones.
Yep.
And he kept losing chickens. And he couldn't figure out how it was happening till one day he just happened to be walking down between them and come around the corner and run smack dab into a Bigfoot who had 2 big old armfuls of chickens. And he realized what was going on. The Bigfoot had seen him opening the door, and it was opening the door, scooping up chickens, and then closing the door so the chickens didn't get out. Well, when he ran into the Bigfoot, the Bigfoot dropped the chickens, and he fell on his butt because, I mean, they impacted each other. The Bigfoot looked at him, grabbed a few of the chickens, and kept on going. And, of course, he sold the farm pretty quick after that. But, we got all kind of chicken houses around here, and I don't know if they lock them up now or not, but they usually, I mean, it wouldn't be nothing for the Bigfoot to go in there and swipe 4 or 5 chickens, and they'd never know it.
Yeah. And the last time I was allowed on one of them big chicken farms because of the biosecurity that they use, they just had standard latches like any other barn door would.
Yeah.
Nothing different, nothing fancy, nothing that you needed a key or technical advance to get it open. So
Yeah. So I'm going to go on to the next one here. Cover and concealment. This is box valleys, bluffs with overhangs, sheltered valleys, heavy foliage, and abandoned quarries. That's just some of the things to look for. If everybody remembers the terrain map that we looked at, we were showing basically the valleys where the creeks were going through. That's one way for them to hunker down. There's enough big hills there that there's probably some bluffs with overhangs that they could shelter under. But one thing that I always like to try to do is we got a research area that we call the cauldron because it's just a big old huge bowl and you can sit on the hilltops around it and look down in it. And I kind of like to get up high to where we can look down in there. And we would actually get responses every time we stoked our fire up on top of one of those hills because they could see us. But they were able to stay down in this cauldron. Nobody would be able to get down in there because you couldn't get down the bluffs into that area. So there you had your cover and concealment. There's a lot of vegetation for them to hide under and enough bluffs that they could kind of get up underneath the overhangs. So, but you guys have any input on this?
I think we kind of covered a bunch of this already.
Yeah, we're going to actually cover the next slide too, pretty much. Avenues of travel along the railroad lines, and these are, the old railroad lines that they've abandoned, and even some of the newer lines. Stan Courtney up in Illinois actually had a report turned into him of people seeing a Bigfoot riding on the back of a train. And I can't say for sure, but if I remember right, Stan actually got to see one doing that same thing, riding on the back of a train. Now, when I was in the Boy Scouts, we used to ride the train 30 miles north, jump off, jump back on another train coming back, and we'd ride it all the way back. Just something to do, but I would not be surprised that a Bigfoot would take advantage of that to travel longer distances.
Well, there's a famous incident in Oklahoma where, a Bigfoot was seen near a casino, and there's actually train tracks that are very close to there. And I was told when I was up there doing an investigation that by everybody, if you want to find footprints, just go over by the train tracks. You're going to find them. It was interesting. I got to plotting sightings on a map, and you could actually go down those train tracks, and there were sightings, all in the towns south of there on the train tracks.
Well, that's like the utility right-of-way for my research areas. Most of the sightings happen within a mile of that right-of-way. So I understand what you're saying about the railroad line there too. So, but
and again, it shows the old road beds too. And one thing that this area is full of, Pineville got its name, and this area was noted at one time of a lot of pines. Well, during the railroad beginning, there were actually pine wars out here. They were fighting each other for the wood. And this area and a lot of the Ozarks is so riddled with old logging roads. Again, they might have saplings, yay big around in them, but for the most part, they're open. And if there's been any newer work on them, the logging roads can really be something too, because again, that's in their backyard. They can hear and see things real easy. And that can be a shot that would really be something to keep an eye out. Plus, if you're going to go to public lands, all of your forest lands have got what they call their Forest Service roads. Again, they're off the beaten track. It's not something you want to take your Prius down, but an average pickup truck can go pretty good.
Yeah.
That's where you had that sighting, was a service road like that down in the Folk area. You know, remember that? Where you had that sighting? That was, again, a Forest Service road. That was a government road that's not used very much. And those, I think, are probably one of them places where it'd be easy for them to go through to cover some ground, but I think it would actually be some pretty easy places to find tracks if a person was in those type of areas.
Right.
Well, it's like Jerry Gressett and his sighting up there at Honubby. We were on a logging road, and the Bigfoot stepped out on the logging road as we were all leaving, and I asked him about that at the Arkansas Bigfoot conference, and he still gets goosebumps on his arms when he thinks about it. So,
well, the Hippieville area, that the road going into that, it was originally just an old wagon road, and Dad was part of the team from the county that turned that into an actual road. And Dad said it was the strangest thing. They'd be out there working and they'd find barefoot tracks all up and down it.
Yep. And again, you go back to where Bigfoot got its name. They were putting logging roads in back there too, if I recall. I know they were putting roads, but I believe it was logging roads that they were putting through that area when Wallace found the first Bigfoot tracks.
Yeah, they were. So,
or not Wallace, Cruz.
Cruz. But Wallace was the owner of the company that Cruz worked for. So,
okay.
All right, I'm gonna click on the next one. Here's talk to the locals. Hand out brochures, business cards, other type advertisements. Talk to area residents. Listen to talk in restaurants, because this has happened to you, Randy.
Numerous times.
Yeah. Let folks know you are interested in their stories, and talk to local law enforcement and newspaper reporters. I do a lot of that around here because the game wardens, they know I'm out there looking for Bigfoot. They'll stand there and look you straight in the eye, and they're lying to you when they say, no, I don't know anything about any Bigfoot, or, there's no such thing as Bigfoot. But you're looking them in the eye and you're like, yeah, you guys are lying out your eye teeth. But I understand why they got to do that.
Yeah.
But while we talk about that, I'm going to flip over to this next one, because this is an example of the brochure that the MABRC uses. This. We put it out so people will be able to report sightings to us and stuff. And down here on the bottom, you see all these little strips. When I put these up, I usually go and take a pair of scissors and cut each strip for them. That way they can just tear it off. But I know one time, Randy, you was at a restaurant where people were talking about it, and you just happened to get information out of it for.
Yeah, and again, it was talking with those people and saying I did understand it, what's got me that investigation. And again, they came in, and I've been in there before and talked about Bigfoot. Bernie and I used to always sit in there and we'd talk about Bigfoot because that's what we're both into. And we'd have people come up and say, well, the one time, the guy's name was Danny. I'm not going to give any more than that, but he said, do them come in white? I said, well, yeah, my first sighting was a white, grayish, whatever you want to call it, Bigfoot. And come to talk, he said, well, I saw this, and this happen, and it was white in color. It was up here. when I asked him, I said, well, just give me an area that you live. You don't have to give me your address. I'm not going to come out and look. And as the crow flies, it was 4 miles from where I was researching. And again, he had no clue I was that close, but his question was, do they come in white?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my garbage can keeps moving down the road. Is that something they might do? Well, I can't say for sure, but, you know, what do you throw in your garbage? You know, if you got bones, old food, I said, predators are going to do it. If it wasn't tore up like a bear would do or a big cat or something, if it just seemed to roll down there on its wheels, I'd say that something had to have rolled it down there. It wasn't smashed going down. So I said, I can't say it isn't because the behavior wouldn't surprise me any. And you know, we've had sat in restaurants before, and again, not even just my local ones. The local ones, they all know it. And again, I get quite a little input there. But again, we were over by Table Rock Lake one time. We were in a restaurant and just jokingly talking about Bigfoot. And that's how we found out that one restaurant. It's not a joke. They won't take food out after dark. Nobody goes out in the back of that place after dark. And exactly why. Well, that ended up being a research area about 3 miles from where a gal passed on that used to be with the group, Dottie. That was 3 miles from her place. And she was having some Bigfoot activity there. So again, sitting down and talking to locals in the restaurant, and again, like I say, you can even just be eavesdropping. You'd be surprised at how much behavior, once you know the behaviors of what we see with Bigfoot, make a lot more sense when you talk about these problems farmers are having with this, or, you know, the city folks or dumpsters are having problems, whatever. And again, around here we got a lot of campgrounds, and I can guarantee you that there is a lot more sightings around campgrounds. Not so much, I said it wrong. There isn't so much sightings, but when you talk to those campground owners, they start talking about the stuff that just doesn't make sense for anything else other than Bigfoot. You know, they don't put bear-proof, you know, garbage cans in areas where there's no bear unless something's getting into the garbage cans and making a mess.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you see a lot of that in some of these campgrounds. Why do you got these bear proof? Well, I don't know. Something keeps getting in them. We had to get them. That's the only way we keep them out of them. I'm thinking to myself, yeah, well, if it's Bigfoot, you're not keeping them out. They're just being a little bit cleaner about their mess.
I'm going to go on to the next one here, guys. So now this is probably where we'll differ on a lot of things. Once you find an area that you want to check out, this is kind of what I do. I drive around the area to get an overall feel for the area. Then if I got the landowner's permission, I'll do a walkthrough of the area to see, you know, what's on the ground there. Observe and know. We listen with parabolic listening devices. Me and Bobby or Cherokee Rose will go out, sit at night and listen. And I'll even deploy audio drop boxes in the area for 3 or 4 days at a time just to see if we hear anything. So,
yeah, the same type of situation, except again, you know, don't just go through the area at a certain time of the day.
Yeah, make several trips different times.
Yep, because again, each time you're there, you get more information.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
I was going to say, a lot of times I'll go in and, you know, the first thing I'll start doing is looking at the, you know, the game trails, looking to see what all's moving through the area, what food's available.
Yeah, good point. And again, you're a better tracker than I am, Jim. So I'm going to go dang, hey, yep, I'll do some looking and listening. And if we're running the wood or road together, I'll let you do the tracking because I'm lacking in that.
But yeah, matter of fact, the area that I'm going to try to go through tonight is basically a new area. As Squatch Finder always says, I'm going to go pop the cherry on that research area.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's, I mean, don't just go one walkthrough. I mean, do 2 or 3 walkthroughs at different times of the day so you can see how the light plays. Also, the more you know about an area, if you go in there at night, you know where basically everything is.
Yep.
So,
well, one thing that, years back when I had Arkansas Tracker Josh come up into my area as much as he did, something that I never would have thought about, and Jim probably has more of an understanding because with his tracking, Josh was the same way. He had that total hunting mentality. He said that don't always do the walk the same because you see other things. If you walk down the road, come back on the same path. Because when you're focused this direction, you may not see something because it was the animals used it from the other direction, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He had a way that we could walk past something on the way down this trail, and when we came back, he was pointing out stuff that we didn't notice on the way because that's not the way they travel through. We went with the way they didn't travel through, so it wasn't noticeable.
So, yeah, like the angle of the trail coming up to the road, might have been at an angle where you didn't see it as you walked this way, but when you walk back, you can see where it come up.
Yeah.
And again, he could pick up on a lot of that stuff that, again, I learned a lot from him, but, I still only know this much compared to what he did.
Yeah. So go to this next one. Of course, here's documentation, and we already admitted we're bad about this. We used to have our research threads where we could put that information. But, write down everything you find out about an area. I've got a lot of it stored on my computer here. You photograph and video everything. I mean, it may not seem important now, but later on down the road, you might have videotaped a set of rocks that 3 months later are stacked up, where you can go back and say, hey, did I video that? Yeah, they were all laying flat. Kind of like Biggjimm and David Mooney. David found that track, so he stacked 3 rocks up. Well, the next morning, it was actually turned into a archway.
Mm-hmm. Little mini Stonehenge.
Yeah. So, no matter if you think it's going to be important now or later, go ahead and do it. I mean, you can save video. Jump drives are so cheap anymore for storage. And here's the one thing that you really imparted this into me, Randy, to where when you go out in the woods, before you even get out of the vehicle, and sometimes even while you're still in the vehicle, put a recorder recording. Because sometimes when you pull up to an area, you won't hear it because your motor's running, but they'll do vocalizations, announcing that you're there or whatever. And it always makes it easier to listen to what you recorded, and instead of trying to remember it from your brain, what this happened or that happened. And since everybody's basically got cell phones now that are smartphones, you got the capability to do GPS tracking on your phone. So you don't need a real fancy GPS unit, to put waypoints and stuff like that. You can actually use your cell phone for that. Yep. But that way, say you found possibly a bedding area. I mean, just throwing that out there. If you GPS it on your phone, you can go back out there and find it without having to tromp around and, trust it to luck that you're going to find it again. So, but
again, the woods can look a lot different, but it also looks a lot similar. You can be 5 foot away from an area. I found that with even setting my drop boxes out. I could be 5 foot away from it for whatever reason. I cannot put my eyeball on it. And it will take 15, 20 minutes of looking in a 20 square foot area to say, well, there it is.
Yeah.
And again, by using the GPS or whatever, that can help that. But most of the GPSs aren't that accurate to where you're going to be within 5 to 7 foot of it anyway. But when I first started that, I mean, I thought I knew the woods that I put it in. And again, I put it in the evening, the next morning, go to pick it up, and I can't find it. And I just keep looking around, and it was a half a tree to the left of where I was looking.
Yeah. Yeah, you and me have deployed plenty of drop boxes out there.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So, but I was just sitting here thinking, I just uploaded from 2016 a Robert Swain presentation where he actually shows screen captures of his documentation. And it's on the channel, the Bigfoot Field Guide channel, for anybody that wants to look at them and see how well he's documenting. I think that's a big thing for people to see for themselves. So, and of course, thank you for everybody watching our little presentation here, but now we're going to keep talking.
Yeah. Well, again, being an audio guy, everything I do out there, I collect. I mean, I'll walk around with a recorder on me between my cell phone for taking pictures and me talking to myself in the woods of what I'm seeing. I mean, for those of us that, Robert, master at drawing things. Jim, another one. I can't draw a stick figure to have it look right. So again, if I can take a picture and talk to it, it's not written documentation, but again, the documentation is there. So if you don't want to do the documentation as far as writing it down, with these cheap audio recorders you can buy, you could put one in your back pocket with a cheap lavender microphone that you got hooked to your shirt, and hey, what was that? Or this looks neat, it's got these 3 rocks, take a couple pictures of it. You might not remember the exact location unless you go into metadata on the pictures, but for the most part you can find it again, and you've got the documentation, because a week and a half, 2 weeks down the road, you've already lost some information if you don't do that. Part of the problem that I've got is I've got audio recordings and stuff from back in 11 and 12 that I know I've got, but I don't remember when. And then I'll hear one and say, dang it, I forgot about that one. We've got the information, but because we are so active at collecting information, we're not spending the time to correlate 2 years ago versus what we're catching now, let alone any further back than that. And that's my biggest downfall, what I'm doing. I can record something. Yeah, well, I've recorded it before. Yeah, but when? What was different? What was the same? We just don't get that type of thing going with it all the time. So,
right. Did we lose Darren?
Well, he's probably taking a nap.
But yeah, I'll admit I'm not the best with documentation, because I'll write stuff down in a notebook intending to keep it, and then next outing I've lost the notebook, and then I won't find it until an outing or 2 later.
Yep. And again, that's the thing, and I think that's where we're all at. hopefully with these episodes that we put on here and we get together, I can jog some memory of yours and you can jog some memory of mine to where we can sit down and, oh, yeah, that did happen there too. I mean, one that both of us have found is, again, a knot on a bow that was held together with a knot.
Yeah.
That's the type of data that's just almost impossible to find. And again, we've got it, but we've got so much other stuff, we never kind of correlate that that's happened in two places.
Well, before we get off of here, something I was kind of wanting to bring up about finding your own research site, getting back to the topic this was all about. This is something I do a lot of, is I'll go looking for information in what I call alternative places. And this is largely, I'll start combing the, newspaper articles or paranormal report forums. And I'm not saying Bigfoot's paranormal, not at all. But with so many of these ghost hunting shows that have popped up in the last few decades, a lot of people will have something weird happen and they'll automatically assume it's a ghost. And you can get on there, and when you start reading about a location and you'll read where people keep reporting ghost encounters, and you're reading stuff like, well, the ghost was throwing rocks at me, the ghost got in my icebox and stole my ham and ran off. After a while, if you know the behavior, this stuff keeps popping up. That might be an area that might be worth checking into.
Oh, you bet. And again, I do agree with that totally. I mean, if you're out looking for ghosts and you're not open-minded, again, everything you hear will be a ghost.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I've had some Bigfoot researchers that I've run into. Well, listen to this audio I've got of a Bigfoot. Everything they record, they want to be a Bigfoot because that's what they're out there looking for, when there is much more, not only in the audio world, logical, but normal vocalization or normal noise that you're hearing. Where with the ghost hunting versus Bigfooting, I could see where that would be something that they would just want to think it's a ghost because it looks somewhat like a human and it does things that animals don't normally do.
And again, I'm not saying you take these stories as sightings, but when you go into a forum about these legend tripper things where people would go to investigate one of these Lover's Lane type stories, or these places where people keep reporting, bizarre happenings that everybody's attributing to ghosts. Thumperville was a great example. I found that site because people were talking about it being haunted, but they're talking about the ghost making the sounds of, wood hitting wood. The ghost is throwing acorns at them. They're screaming in the woods at night.
And that was a cool place.
It was.
So, guys, I gotta apologize for dropping off. I tried to upload a video and realized that we can't upload that type of video, so I dropped off. So, if y'all was wondering where I went,
well, we just figured you went to take a nap or something. Them Bigfooters. Yeah.
So
bathroom visits, what I figured.
It was. I tried to upload a video of our dash cam going through Jurassic Park, just to have something going in the middle of our screen there, so people could look at it. But it was the wrong format. It crashed my computer on my end, so I'm like, crap.
No big deal. No big deal.
But speaking of Bigjimm's research, you put a lot of those sightings in that little booklet that you had, didn't you?
Yeah, and that was Well, that was the up to just prior to the Bluff Creek track discoveries, and these were all in Oklahoma.
So, yeah, it's a pretty good little book. Hopefully, we can have a bunch of those printed up here soon. You and me need to get together and try to get it on Amazon for you.
Well, I have fixed all the typos in it. I have to thank Robert Swain for helping me. The original batch, I did not have time to proofread.
Yeah. Well, we was kind of under the gun. We let the symposium sneak up on us. So, but
and what was really interesting is I kept seeing a lot of the behavior, because a lot of those older reports were actually from newspaper clippings and from narratives from where they would be interviewing old timers, at the turn of the century that were here, in the 1860s. But a lot of these reports are describing the exact same behaviors we're seeing with Bigfoot today.
Yes. Yes. And again, that was why it was so easy when I was down in Louisiana, Texas, working with my wife on those security gates for oil rigs, seeing and hearing, and just so many things that people were experiencing, especially in Louisiana, that they couldn't explain, but behavioral, it matched Bigfoot behavior that we've all know about and documented. So it gets to be very interesting of how, again, going back to your, where you were doing some research for sighting possibilities. People can come up with a real lot of excuses for this happening that shouldn't be happening and just leave it, I don't know, and walk away from it. And you're sitting there, ta-da, and you go out and find information and even some evidence to back up what they're talking about.
Well, even when I was growing up down on the bottom and we were having all that weird stuff happen, in my mind, I wasn't thinking Bigfoot then. We had a pen with rabbits in it out by the creek, and we'd go out there and we'd be missing a rabbit, but the pen would be shut. Something was literally coming up there, opening the pen, getting a rabbit out, and closing it.
Yep.
And there wasn't nobody else down there.
Well, again, that one oil spot that we went at Louisiana where they were drilling, had the neighbors stop over. I wish you'd tell those doggone roughnecks to go ahead and stay on site during the night. I don't need them moseying around and snooping around my property at night. Well, after a 12-hour shift on an oil rig, them boys are not going to walk a mile to your place to goddamn snoop around the backside of your house.
Right.
But I told the guy, I said, hey, I'll talk to the company man and let them know that you have your concerns. Well, I never did because I knew what it was. There was something new out there. So the guy was more observant. So he was seeing something that had probably been there for years and he didn't ever see it before.
Well, I've got those two examples I love to use to demonstrate people are going to see what they want in the sightings. And they were both in the same place a week apart. This was in Arkansas in one of the WMAs. The first guy, deer hunter, well, both of them were deer hunters actually. And these sightings happened I think, if I'm not mistaken, they were on the same road. But this guy was really into aliens. He listened to Coast every day, watched Ancient Aliens. Well, he gets in touch with one of the UFO research groups saying how he's seen a gray alien cross the road. And he described it as being about 9 foot tall and kind of hairy looking. And he said he knew it was an alien because he had missing time. Well, about a week later, another deer hunter is in the exact same area, and he says he sees 2 Bigfoot cross the road. And one of them, he said, was about 9 foot tall, covered with grayish hair. So they clearly saw the same thing. And somebody said, well, how do you explain the missing time? And I said, honestly, I think the deer hunter, because he said he parked his truck, I think he fainted. I mean, what deer hunter is going to admit he fainted? Out, everybody, outdoorsmen tend to be kind of macho guys.
You bet. Yep. And again, that just makes sense. But once I didn't step away from it, but couldn't do the research as much, and we went out and did other things with life, I was really surprised at how much people are seeing that behavioral-wise fits. And again, whether they were trying to say it was Bigfoot, yeah, there was that, rookaroo or whatever they call it down there, that they said it was. And, some people just called it bears, but again, the behavior it was doing couldn't be bears. So again, with what I learned in the Bigfoot research, it made that time in my life a whole lot more enjoyable because of it.
Yeah, and and the behaviors we're talking about, they go way back too.
Yep.
I found a couple of scientific, they're kind of cultural folkloric papers from Canada. And they, these were from the French fur trappers in the 1700s. And they're talking about, wendigos and, rougaroos.
Mm-hmm.
And, they're going on to describe some of the behavior that these things were doing. And they were talking about how the Indians were all scared of them, and these things would sneak into camp at night and raid food. And one of the reports even actually goes on to describe them. It flat out says that they can walk on 2 legs or 4. They're the size of a cow. They're covered in hair and have a face like a man. I mean, what would you describe that as today if you saw it?
That's it.
Well, guys, I hate to say this. Man, my desk looks pretty damn bad. But I think we had a pretty good show this evening, and
yeah, we kind of blew over that hour mark, didn't we?
A little bit.
Yeah. But it was great seeing you both again. We'll have some more shows here pretty soon. I've got a couple of side shows that I'm going to do, basically that are presentations from the symposium and the conference and stuff. Just kind of put them out there as episodes. But we'll put our heads together and figure out when our next show is going to be, and we'll put that out there for everybody. Outside of that, hope everybody has a good evening. Stay safe, and we'll see y'all on the next show. You guys got anything you want to say before we get off here?
Well, just wish everybody a good evening and keep on squatching.
You bet. And again, when you're out there and about, especially in this heat, make sure you take some water and keep yourselves hydrated. It don't do us no good if we end up getting sick in the woods.
That's so true. All right, guys. Well, y'all have a good evening. And if y'all will hang on for a few minutes after I play the outro, we'll visit a few minutes and then get off here.
Sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
You've been listening to the Bigfoot Field Guide radio show, presented by the Mid-America Bigfoot Research Center, where researchers think outside the box. Available for download on iTunes and from mid-americabigfoot.com. Thanks for listening, and remember, the next time you're in the woods alone, maybe you're not.